Now watch verse 4. And Jesus said to him, see that you tell no one. Now he's going to tell everyone. We know that from Mark's gospel. And wouldn't you, right? You've had leprosy for, a decade, and now you're cleansed, and you're going to tell everyone. See that you tell no one, but go your way, show yourself to the priests, and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Now, Jesus tells this man, go to the temple in Jerusalem. They're way up in the Galilee at this point, near the town of Capernaum. He tells him, go to the temple in Jerusalem, show yourself to the priest, that would be the high priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded in the Old Testament, in the law, as a testimony to them. And note that it's a testimony to them, to the priests, to the religious leaders. The cleansing of the leper is the first specific healing mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew. As we saw in chapter 4, it says that Jesus healed many everywhere he went. This is the first one that is specifically described for us in the Gospel of Matthew. And that's important. Why is that important? Well, remember, Matthew wrote this Gospel to Jews to show that Jesus is the Messiah of the Jews and the King of Israel. And listen, give me your attention. The Jewish rabbis taught that there are 3 miracles that only the Messiah would be able to perform. And one of those miracles that they taught only the Messiah would be able to perform was the cleansing of a leper. If you're taking notes, the other 2 miracles that the religious leaders taught only the Messiah could do was casting out a demon from a deaf, mute person, which Jesus will do in Matthew chapter 12. We'll look at that when we get to chapter 12. And the third miracle that they said only the Messiah will be able to do this when he comes is the healing of a man born blind, which Jesus did in John chapter 9. And we don't have time to go to John chapter 9 to look at that, so let me just kind of summarize it for you. With the miracle of the healing of the man born blind, Jesus was in the temple in Jerusalem. He's having a discussion or a debate with the religious leaders. And in the midst of that debate, Jesus said, most assuredly, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am. Using the Old Testament name of God for himself. So he's claiming to be God. And it tells us in John's gospel that when Jesus said that, before Abraham was, I am, the religious leaders took up stones to stone him to death for blasphemy, because Jesus was claiming to be God by making that statement. So Jesus left the temple because they want to kill him. And we're told in John chapter 9, as Jesus is leaving the temple, he heals a man who was born blind. After using the Old Testament name for God for himself, as he's walking out the door, Jesus does one of the miracles that those religious leaders said only the Messiah will do. That's what you call a mic drop as you're walking out the door, right? So that's in John chapter 9. Here we have this miracle of the cleansing of a leper, something the priest said only the Messiah would do. That's why Matthew puts this miracle first in his description of the miracles. This helps us to understand what Jesus says in verse 4. Again, look at verse 4. Jesus said, go your way, show yourself to the priest, to the high priest, and offer the gift that Moses commanded as a testimony to them. Now, the offering of the gift of a cleansed leper is described in Leviticus chapter 14 that we're going to look at in just a minute. Don't turn there yet. But here's the thing. Since the giving of the law of Moses to the time of Jesus, no Jewish person had ever been cleansed of leprosy. No one had ever made this offering of the cleansed leper. That's why the religious leaders, the religious teachers concluded, well, this offering for the cleansed leper must be for when the Messiah comes. Since no one's been cleansed of leprosy, and we've never had to offer this offering before, Why did God put it in his law? Well, God must have included it in his law for when the Messiah comes, and the Messiah will cleanse lepers, and then when the Messiah is here, we'll make this offering for the cleansed leper. That's the only explanation, logical explanation, they could come up with. Why would God put this in his law and we never use it? And you've got this law just sitting on the books that we never use because no one's ever cleansed of leprosy and coming to the temple to make this offering. So this instruction in Leviticus 14 existed for 1,500 years, and no priest ever offered the gift for a cleansed leper. But now, Jesus starts cleansing lepers and sending them to the high priest at the temple in Jerusalem to make the offering for the cleansed leper as a testimony to them. A testimony of what? The Messiah has come. The Messiah is here. And so 1,500 years we've had this law in the books. Never had to use it because no one's ever shown up saying they've been cleansed of leprosy. Now all of a sudden there's a steady stream of people showing up at the temple saying they've been cleansed of leprosy by Jesus of Nazareth. On one occasion, Jesus cleansed 10 lepers simultaneously and sent all 10 of them to the priests. So one day, 10 people showed up together at the temple saying, hey, we need to talk to a priest. We've been cleansed of leprosy. This was an undeniable sign to the Jewish leaders that the Messiah had come, according to their own teaching. Jesus wanted to force the Jewish leaders to make a decision about him. He's making it undeniable, just as Jesus wants all of us to make a decision about him and receive him as Lord and Savior. So he cleanses this leper and sends him to the temple, to the high priest, to make the offering. One of the signs that those religious teachers said the Messiah will do. That's how we'll know the Messiah has come, when he'll cleanse lepers when he comes. Now, Matthew's gospel is not written in chronological order, so the next thing that happens after the healing of this leper and sending him to the priest is actually found over in Luke chapter 5. And I want you to turn there so you can see what happens. So you can see the response to the cleansing of this leper. Luke chapter 5. At this point, Luke chapter 5, Jesus is in the town of Capernaum. And it's a story you're probably familiar with, but there's a point in here that you maybe have overlooked before. Luke chapter 5, beginning in verse 17. Watch what it says. Now it happened on a certain day, as he was teaching, look what it says, that there were Pharisees and teachers of the law sitting by who had come out of every town of Galilee, Judea, and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was present to heal them. Do you see what it says? There were Pharisees and teachers of the law in the audience now who came out of every town of Galilee, Judea, and Jerusalem. Why? He cleansed a leper. That's something only the Messiah will do.